And now, a dramatic reading of something that you might find familiar, but the Gen Z version, okay? Chapter 1, The Boy Who Wasn't Unalived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive liked flexing that they were very basic, thank you. TBH, they were the last people you'd think would be sus, because they were all fax, no printer! Mr. Dursley was adulting at a film called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a dummy thick with 3 C's, man with hardly any neck, although he had an absolute unit of a mustache. Miss Dursley was a total Karen with 0 chill and had hella neck, which came in very useful when she was stalking her neighbors and not minding her own. The Dursleys had a furniture incel of a son named Dudley, who they thought was the main character. The Dursleys were mostly thriving, but they also had low-key tea, which didn't pass the vibe check, and their greatest fear was to get called out and cancelled. They were girl-bossing too close to the sun, and didn't think their clout could bounce back if their fam, the Potters, were revealed. MILF Lily Potter and Miss Dursley's sis, but Miss D had gone ghost in real life, no cap. Miss D fronted she didn't have a sis, because Lil and her deadbeat mans were straight up cringe. If the neighbors ever peeped the Potters, it'd be a big yikes. Low-key, the Dursleys knew the Potters and their own crotch goblin too, but they never peeped. This BB from FR Solid Reason 2 kept the in-laws yoked. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a gross being like that. When Mr. and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dull gray "Fight Me" Tuesday of our lore opens, the cloudy overlays didn't vibe like strange and mysterious things would be happening all over the country. Mr. Dursley hummed as he picked out his most boring tie for work, and Miss Dursley spilled the tea as she was trying to put a screaming Dudley into his heckin' high chair. None of them noticed a chonky, tawny owl flutter past the window. At 8:30, the chonk lord that is Mr. Dursley, picked up the briefcase, pecked Miss Dursley on the cheek, and tried to kiss Dudley goodbye, but missed, because Dudley was losing it and yeeted his cereal at the wall. "Little lad," chortled Mr. Dursley as he left the house. He got into his whip and backed out of the driveway of the basicest fuck house. It was on this one edge of the street that you feel you could accidentally hit the elbow of your car on that he noticed something sus. A cat popping off and reading a map. For a sec, Mr. Dursley didn't realize what he'd seen. Then he jerked his head around to look again. There was a chonking tabby cat standing on the corner of Private Drive. But there wasn't a map in sight. What could he have been thinking of? He must have accidentally picked up one of Mrs. Dursley's edibles that morning. Mr. Dursley blinked and stared at the chonking cat. It stared back, as if Mr. Dursley drove around the corner and up the road. He watched the chonkers in his mirror. It was now reading the sign that said Privet Drive. No, looking at the sign. Cats couldn't read maps or signs. Period T. Mr. Dursley gave himself a little shake and put the chonkers out of his thinking organ. As he drove towards the town, he had no thonks, head empty, except for some drills he had to sell. Let's get this loaf, he thought. But on the edge of town, drills were yeeted out of his mind by something else. As he sat in the morning traffic jam starter pack, he couldn't help noticing that there seemed to be a lot of not very shady at all people about. People in cloaks, no cap. Mr. Dursley couldn't bear people who dressed in clergy clothes. The get-ups you saw on young people. He supposed this was some stupid new fashion. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel and his eyes fell on a huddle of these weirdos standing quite close by. They were whispering excitedly together. Mr. Dursley was enraged that the couple of them weren't young at all. Why, the man had to be a boomer, and wearing an emerald green cloak. The audacity of him, but then it struck Mr. Dursley that this was probably some silly stunt, a TikTok probs. These people were obviously collecting for something. Yes, that would be it. The traffic moved on, and a few minutes later, Mr. Dursley arrived in the Grunnings parking lot, his mind back on drills. Mr. Dursley always sat with his back to the window in his office on the 9th floor. If he hadn't, he might have found it harder to concentrate on drills that morning. He didn't see the owls popping off in broad daylight, though people down in the street did. They pointed and gazed deceased as owl after owl sped overhead. Most of them had never seen an owl even at nighttime. Mr. Dursley, however, had a perfectly normal owl-free morning. He had no chill and yelled at 5 different people. He made several important telephone calls and shouted a bit more. He was in a very good mood until lunchtime, when he thought he'd stretch his legs and walk across the road to buy himself a bun from the bakery. He'd forgotten all about the people in cloaks until he passed a group of them next to the Starbucks. He took a big look at them unhappy as he passed. He didn't know why, but they seemed kinda sus. This bunch were whispering excitedly too, and he couldn't see a single GoFundMe donation tin. It was on his way back past them, clutching a large donut in a bag, that he caught a few words of what they were saying. The Potters, that's right, that's what I heard. Bet their boy, Harry. Mr. Dursley felt like he'd been ratioed in real life. He looked back at the whispers and wondered if he should at them, but he thought better of it. Even a girl boss had his weak moments, and anyway, there were plenty of people called Potter with moots called Harry. There was no point in worrying his Discord kitten, his sister, on both their D&I lists. During that day, emo thoughts kept dabbing across Mr. Dursley's mind. He later left the building and nearly sister slammed into someone just outside his door. "Nar," he growled as the man nearly fell. However, he didn't seem triggered at all. Instead, the funky little dude pressed the slay button. So true, bestie. Even muggles like you should slay today when the sussiest of Bacchus have been cancelled at last. And then the old man hugged Mr. Dursley real and headed off. Mr. Dursley couldn't even find it in him. Yeah, Fortnite 10K, we're about to go down, baby! He hurried to his car, and the Fast and the Furious Tokyo drifted his straight home. As he pulled into the driveway, the first thing his sister saw was the same chonk cat he'd seen the morning sitting on the wall. Point of view, you're on my D&I list, Mr. Dursley spat at the cat as he walked inside. His day was swag as fuck. Dudley had learned to say "nour," just like his bestie, cooed Miss Dursley. When his fave Ohm finally went AFK, Mr. Dursley went to the living room to watch some news. Last thing, birders everywhere are fighting for their lives right now. Them hooters hunt at night and avoid sunlight like nerds, but for some reason they've been invading our skies since sunrise. The science isn't sciencing. The newscaster smirked. Weird as fuck, bro. Now, Jim McGuffin, what weather do boy? Another owl shower tonight. Say less, Ted, said the weatherman. TBH IDK, but the burbs aren't the only weird today. Viewers as far as Kent, Yorkshire, and Dundee have been tweeting that instead of the rain I promised yesterday, the sky is having shooting stars. Maybe they're celebrating bonfire night early. It will actually rain tonight, though, but it's about to be raining hands if motherfuckers don't stop calling about these damn birds. Mr. Dursley, 404 errored into his armchair. Shooting stars, owls waking up and choosing violence, sus boomers dressed in Ren Fair outfits, and spilling tea about them Potters. Miss Dursley came into the living room carrying 2 cups of tea. It was no good. He'd have to say something to her. He cleared his throat nervously. Petunia, dear, you haven't heard from your sis late, maybe? As he had expected, Miss Dursley looked like she ate a lemon. After all, they ghosted her sis. No, she said sharply. Why? Cringy crap on the news, Mr. Dursley mumbled. Owls, shooting stars, and there were lots of edgelords in town today. And, snapped Miss Dursley, well, I just thought maybe it was something to do with, her crew. Miss Dursley sipped her tea through pursed lips. Mr. Dursley wondered whether he dared to tell her that he'd hear the name Potter. He decided that he didn't care. Instead, he said he casually, as he could, their crotch goblin. He'd be about Dudley's age now, wouldn't he? Bet, huffed Miss Dursley. What's his name again, Howard, is it? Nah, Harry. Nasty cringe name, if you ask me. Oh, yeah, Mr. Dursley felt punch legit. He decided to shut the fuck up as the fitness upstairs to catch some Z's, while Miss Dursley took her face. Mr. Dursley lurked in the bedroom window overlooking the front garden. The floof was still there. It was starting down Privet Drive as though it were waiting for something. Was he imagining things? Could all this have anything to do with the Potters? If it did, if it got out that they were related to a pair of, they would totes be cancelled. The Dursleys got into bed. Miss Dursley crashed, but Mr. Dursley couldn't shake the intrusive thoughts. Finally, he confronted himself that the Potters were involved. There was no reason for them to invade Dursley's space. The Potters knew very well that he and his bae thought that they were cringe and wanted nothing to do with their shenanigans. He couldn't see how they could get up in his business. They were prompt, safe, and out of the way. Nope. Mr. Dursley was drifting off uneasily, but the floof outside was on high alert. Like a fuzzy statue, With penetrating eyes, it stared unblinking at the far corner of Privet Drive. It showed superb chill as the world happened around it. An ancient man appeared on the corner. The cat had been Protec on Privet Drive. He was tall, thin, and very old, with a boss beard long enough to tuck into his belt. He was slaying in his long robes, a purple cloak that swept the ground, high-heeled buckled boots. His blue eyes were light, bright, sparkling behind half-moon spectacles, and his honker was long and crooked as though he had been punched in the face before. This ya boy, Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore was super chill about the fact that he wasn't wanted on this street. He was busy doing a self-body cavity search until he felt the gaze of the Cato. He chuckled and muttered, "I should have known." He found his quarry, a silver cigarette lighter, flicked it open and clicked it, ripped the nearest street lamp. Your boy got click-happy and plunged the street into darkness. Now the noisy Nancy neighbors could see nothing on the block. The old man waltzed down the street and chill with the cat. "Sup, Prof. McGonagall?" He turned to smile at the tabby, who was now a human with the air of a CEO serious businesswoman. She was wearing square glasses exactly the shape of markings on the cat. Her Luke was on fleek with an emerald green cloak and black hair and a tight bun. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. "Prof, cats don't look like they're planking. Brick walls aren't comfy." "Why, you know party. There's like a dozen dank bangers I passed getting here." Prof McGonagall sniffed angrily. "Oh yes, everyone's celebrating, all right. High-key Muggle noticed. It was on their idiot box. Flocks of birds shooting stars. Muggles have eyes, shooting stars down in Kent, but that dead Dallas Diggle smooth brain. You can't blame them," Dumbledore cooed. "This bull been like 2020 for 11 years. Bet," said Prof. McG irritably. "But that's no reason to lose our chill. People like Herp Derp strutting like peacocks in broad daylight, not even dressed in Muggle swag, sipping tea." She threw a sharp sideways glance at Dumbledore here, as though hoping he was going to tell her something, but he didn't, so she went on. "A fine thing it would be if on the very day you know who kicked rocks, the Muggles found out about us. Did we really take a W?" "Bet," said Dumbledore. "We have so much to be thankful for. Want a lemon drop?" "What the fuck? Lemon drop? Muggle candy? That is a dank." "Nope, Prof. McG initiated Ice Queen mode, even if you know who has stepped off." "Girl, names are a thing. That trash is called Voldemort." Prof. McG flinched, but homeboy was unsticking lemon drops and gave no fucks. "Chillax, it's just a name." "Bet," Prof. McG exasperated, but eyeing Dumbledore like a snack. "But you're the only one who can make Voldemort salty." "Flattery will get you nowhere. Voldemort didn't have moves, though," Dumbledore said calmly. "For real, you do too, but don't flex. You make me blush." Prof. McG shot Dumbledore a sharp look and said, "The burbs are nothing next to this tea they be sipping. Legit, what they say has me shook." Professor McGonagall had obviously reached the point where she was most anxious to discuss the real reason she had been waiting on a cold, hard wall all day. For neither a cat nor a woman had she fixed Dumbledore with such piercing stare as she did now. It was plain of whatever everyone was saying, that not going to believe it until Dumbledore, and there was no cap. Dumbledore, however, was choosing another lemon drop and didn't answer. "What they're saying," she pressed on, "is that last night Voldemort turned up in Godric's Hollow. He went to find the Potters, and that he unalived Lily and James Potter." Dumbledore hung his head. Prof. McG gasped. "Lily and James, what the heck? I can't even." "Oh, Albus." Dumbledore reached out and patted her on the shoulder. "I'm shook too." Professor McGonagall's voice was shook as she went on. "That's not all. They're saying he tried to unalive their son, Harry Potter, but he took an L and his power broke, and that's why he's gone." Dumbledore nodded glumly. "Legit?" faltered Professor McGonagall. "After he's done, he failed to unalive a Babin and SHM. How did Harry survive?" "We can only guess," said Dumbledore. "We may never know." Professor McGonagall pulled out a tissue and dabbed at her eyes beneath her spectacles. Dumbledore gave a great sniff as he took a golden watch from his pocket and examined it. It was a very odd watch. It had 12 hands but no numbers. Instead, little planets were moving around the edge. It must have made sense to Dumbledore, though, because he put it back in his pocket and said, "Hagrid's late. I suppose he's the one who told you I'd be here, BT Dubs?" "Bet," said Prof. McG. "Also, I don't suppose you're going to tell me why you're here of all places. I've come to bring Harry to his aunt and uncle. They're the only family he has left now." You can't mean these Karens?" cried Professor McGonagall, jumping to her feet and pointing at number 4. "Dumbledore, you can't. I've been watching them all day. These basic fools aren't in the same WhatsApp group, and their spawn, I saw him kicking his mother all the way up the street screaming for sweets. Harry Potter come and live here? It's the best place for him," said Dumbledore. "His aunt and uncle will be able to explain everything to him when he's older. I've written them a letter." "A letter?" repeated Professor McGonagall faintly, sitting down on the wall. "For real, Dumbledore? You think you can explain all this in a letter? These people will never understand him. He'll be famous, legendary. I couldn't be shook if today was known as Harry Potter Day in the future. There will be books written about Harry. Every child in our world will know his name." "Bet," said Dumbledore, looking super serious through his specs, "it would be enough to go to anyone's head. An influencer before he can walk and talk, famous for something he won't even remember. Can't you see how much better off he'll be growing up away from all that until he's ready to take it?" Professor McGonagall made fish faces like she was going to say something, but thought better. She composed herself, then said, "Bet, IKR, but how is the boy getting here, Dumbledore?" She eyed his cloak suddenly as though he was transporting the Babbin. "Hagrid's bringing him." "You think it big brain to trust Hagrid with something important as this?" "I would trust Hagrid with my life," said Dumbledore. His heart is goat," as Professor McGonagall grudgingly, "but you can't pretend he's not an airhead. He does tend to—" What was that? A vroom vroom sound broke the silence around them. It grew steadily louder as they looked up and down the street for some sign of a headlight. It swelled to a roar as they both looked up at the sky. The huge motorcycle fell out of the air, landed in the road in front of them. If the motorcycle was huge, it was nothing compared to the beast of a man straddling it. He was almost twice as tall as a normal man and had some major BDE, big dick energy. His fluffy factor was, oh hell no, so wild. Long tangles of bushy black hair and beard hid most of his face. He had hands the size of hubcaps, and his feet in the leather boots were like baby dolphins in his vast muscular arms as he was holding a bundle of blankets. "Hagrid," said Dumbledore, sounding relieved. "Finally, where'd you get the ride?" "Borrowed it, Professor Dumbledore, sir," he said, the giant gently disembarking from the bike. "Young Sirius Black lent it to me. I've got him, sir." "Any issues?" "Nope. His house was almost destroyed, but I got him out all right before the muggles started swarming around. He took a napper as we was flying over Bristol." Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall bent forward over the bundle of blankets. Inside, just visible, was the Babbage sleeping under a tuft of jet black hair. Over his forehead, they could see a curious shapely cut like a bolt of lightning. "Is that where—" whispered Professor McGonagall. "Bet," said Dumbledore. "He'll have that scar forever." "Can't you fix it, Dumbledore?" "Yeah, but no. Scars come in handy. I have one on my knee, and that is totes a map to the London Underground." "Well, gimme, Hagrid. Let's get this over with." Dumbledore took Harry in his arms and turned towards the Dursleys' house. Could I say bye to him, sir?" said Hagrid. He bent his great shaggy beard over Harry and gave him what must have been a very scratchy, whiskery kiss. Then suddenly Hagrid let out a noise like a wounded pupper. "Shut the fuck up," hissed Professor McGonagall. "You'll wake the normies." Sorry, sobbed Hagrid, taking out a large spotted handkerchief and burying his face in it. "But I can't stand it. Lily and James unalived, and poor old Harry off to live with the muggles." Yeah, tragic, but control yourself, Hagrid. It will be found," Professor McGonagall whispered, patting Hagrid gently on the arm as Dumbledore stepped over the low garden wall and walked to the front door. He laid Harry gently on the doorstep, took a letter out of his cloak, tucked it inside Harry's blanket, and then came back to the other two. For a full minute, the three of them stood and looked at the little bundle. Hagrid's shoulders shook, Professor McGonagall blinked furiously, and the twinkling light that usually shone from Dumbledore's eyes seemed to have gone out. "Welp," said Dumbledore, "finally that's it, time to dip. We might as well go party hardy." "Yep," said Hagrid in a very muffled voice. "Finna give Sirius Black his ride. Good night, Professor McGonagall, Professor Dumbledore, sir." Wiping the streaming eyes on his jacket sleeve, Hagrid swung himself into the motorcycle and kicked the engine into life. With a roar, it rose into the air and off into the night. "See you soon, G," said Dumbledore, nodding to her. Professor McGonagall blew her nose in reply. Dumbledore walked off into the night. On the corner, he stopped and took out a silver put-outer. He clicked it once, and 12 balls of light sped back up into the street lamps so that Privet Drive glowed suddenly orange, and he could make out a tabby cat slinking around the corner at the end of the street. He could just see the bundle of blankets on the step of number 4. "GL, Harry," he murmured. He spun his head, swished his cloak, and vanished into the night. A breeze ruffled the neat hedges of Privet Drive, super basic even under the stars, the very last place you would expect astonishing things not to happen. Harry Potter cuddled up inside his blankies, sleeping soundly. One small hand closed on the letter beside him, and he slept on, not knowing he was special, not knowing he was famous, not knowing he would be woken in a few hours' time by Miss Dursley's scream as she opened the front door to put out the milk bottles, nor that he would spend the next few weeks being prodded and pinched by his cousin Dudley. He couldn't know that at this very moment, peeps meeting in secret all over the country, getting lit and staying in hushed voices, to Harry Potter, the boy who wasn't unalived.